The sky darkens suddenly over the valley of Aijalon. The Israelite army pauses, their swords still wet with the blood of their enemies, as they look up at the gathering clouds. Just moments before, the sun blazed overhead, giving them light for their pursuit. Now an unnatural darkness sweeps across the battlefield. The fleeing Amorite armies glance back, a momentary hope crossing their faces. Perhaps the coming storm will slow the Israelites' advance, giving them time to escape and regroup. Joshua, son of Nun, stands upon a rocky outcrop, his weathered face turned skyward. His eyes, which have witnessed 40 years of wilderness wandering and now the beginning of the conquest of Canaan, narrow as he studies the clouds. These are not rain clouds. These are not like any storm clouds he has ever seen. There is something different about them, something that makes the hairs on his arms stand on end. The air feels charged, like the moment before lightning strikes, but the electricity lingers, building rather than releasing its tension. The Amorite kings, who had joined forces against Gibeon, Israel's new ally, continue their desperate retreat down the road toward Beth Horon. Behind them, the pursuing Israelites hesitate, uncertain whether to continue their advance or seek shelter from the approaching storm. But Joshua remains fixed, his attention captured by the sky above. He raises his staff toward heaven, a gesture reminiscent of his mentor, Moses, before the Red Sea. What happens next will be recorded in Israel's sacred texts and retold for generations. What unfolds in the coming moments will reshape the understanding of divine intervention in warfare. Can stones falling from the sky truly kill more enemies than the swords of an entire army? And how will this moment change our understanding of what it means to face impossible odds? The story of the Hailstones at Gibeon is not merely an ancient battle tale. It stands as one of history's most extraordinary demonstrations of divine intervention, a moment when the natural world itself became a weapon more deadly than human armaments. Yet for all its supernatural wonder, this event leaves physical evidence and historical ripples that extend far beyond a single afternoon in Canaan's conquest. The year was approximately 1406 BC. The Israelites had just crossed the Jordan River into Canaan, the land promised to their ancestors. After generations of slavery in Egypt and 40 years of desert wandering, they had finally arrived at their destination. Their first major victories had come at Jericho and Ai, demonstrating that this band of former slaves had become a formidable military force. These initial successes sent shockwaves through the region. The Canaanite city-states, which had enjoyed centuries of relative autonomy under Egyptian influence, now faced an existential threat. The political landscape was already fragile. Egyptian power was receding from the region, creating a power vacuum that various groups sought to fill. The arrival of the Israelites, with their claims to divine backing and their surprising military victories, represented a fundamental disruption to the established order. When the people of Gibeon, a major Canaanite city, chose to make peace with Israel through deception, it triggered a crisis among the neighboring kingdoms. This alliance not only provided Israel with a strategic foothold in central Canaan, but also threatened to inspire other cities to break ranks with their traditional allies. For the 5 Amorite kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, this defection could not go unpunished. Their response was swift and decisive. A coalition army marched against Gibeon to make an example of the city that had aligned with the invaders. The message was clear. Collaboration with Israel would bring immediate and devastating consequences. The Gibeonites, now bound in covenant with Israel, sent urgent messengers to Joshua at Gilgal. "Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, for all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us." Joshua faced his first major test of covenant loyalty. The Gibeonites had deceived Israel into making a peace treaty, claiming to be from a distant land when they were actually nearby neighbors. Yet a covenant was a covenant, sworn before Israel's God. Breaking it, even if it had been achieved through deception, was not an option for a people whose identity was founded on covenant faithfulness. What followed was a nighttime march that would alter the course of history. a forced march of approximately 20 miles from Gilgal to Gibeon, climbing nearly 3,400 feet in elevation. Joshua led his army through the darkness, arriving at dawn to surprise the Amorite coalition. But this was merely the prelude to the unprecedented events that would unfold that day. Events recorded in Israel's sacred texts and debated by historians and theologians for millennia. The 5 Amorite kings represented the most formidable military coalition in Canaan's Central Highlands. Commanding the forces of 5 major city-states, these rulers had built their power through decades of successful warfare and diplomacy. Jerusalem, under Adoni-Zedek, was already an ancient city with massive fortifications dating back centuries. Archaeological excavations have uncovered city walls from this period that stood over 10 feet thick, a testament to the engineering prowess and military might of these Canaanite kingdoms. Their armies were not merely numerous but professionally trained. Unlike the Israelites, who had only recently transitioned from a nomadic existence to organized warfare, the Amorite forces included career soldiers equipped with the most advanced bronze weaponry of the age. Their chariots, each requiring substantial resources to build and maintain, represented the ancient world's equivalent of modern tanks. Mobile platforms that could rapidly deploy skilled warriors across the battlefield while remaining relatively protected. These kingdoms had survived and thrived amid the power struggles between Egypt, Hatti, and Mesopotamian forces. They had weathered invasions, rebellions, and the mysterious sea peoples who had destabilized other coastal regions. Their continued existence testified to their resilience and martial prowess. Historical records from neighboring cultures describe the fearsome reputation of these Canaanite forces. An Egyptian text from the period refers to the mighty men of Canaan, whose spears are like reeds in a marsh, countless and overwhelming. Mesopotamian diplomatic correspondence mentions the kings of the western lands, whose warriors drink blood and know not defeat. The Amorite coalition brought with them not only superior numbers, estimated at between 15 and 20,000 warriors compared to Israel's force of perhaps 8 to 10,000, but also significant technological advantages. Their soldiers wore scaled bronze armor that could deflect most Bronze Age weapons. Their composite bows, made from layers of wood, horn, and sinew, could launch arrows with enough force to penetrate leather shields at over 200 yards. Their chariots, numbering perhaps 400-500 in total, could quickly outflank infantry and shower them with arrows from mobile platforms. Psychologically, they employed tactics designed to intimidate and demoralize their opponents. Before battles, their priests would perform elaborate ceremonies invoking the protection of deities like Baal, the storm god, and Anat, the goddess of war. They would display the trophies of previous victories, often grisly reminders of the fate awaiting those who opposed them. Their battle cries, simultaneously uttered by thousands of warriors, created a wall of sound designed to paralyze enemies with fear. One recovered inscription from the period, attributed to a Canaanite king, declares, "My enemies melt before me like wax before fire. Their courage turns to water at the sound of my approach. Their gods abandon them when they see my standards on the horizon." By all conventional military assessments, the Amorite coalition represented an overwhelming force that should have easily crushed both the Gibeonites and any Israelite forces foolish enough to come to their aid. Their previous conquests had established their reputation as undefeatable in conventional warfare. Against such power, what hope could a recently formed nation of former slaves possibly have? Joshua, son of Nun, had not been born a leader. In his earliest appearances in the biblical narrative, he serves quietly as Moses' assistant, a background figure in the drama of Israel's liberation and desert wandering. His origins were humble. Born into slavery in Egypt, a member of the tribe of Ephraim, without noble lineage or special status. Yet something in this unassuming man caught the attention of Moses, who gradually entrusted him with increasing responsibility. Joshua's first significant mention comes when Moses selects him to lead Israel's forces against the attacking Amalekites, a battle won only when Moses, supported by Aaron and Hur, keeps his hands raised toward heaven. This early lesson would prove formative in Joshua's leadership philosophy. Victory comes not through superior strategy or strength alone, but through divine favor and intervention. It established a pattern that would define his approach to the seemingly impossible challenges ahead. Joshua's preparation for leadership unfolded over decades. As one of the 12 spies sent to explore Canaan, he was among only 2 who returned with a favorable report, demonstrating a faith that looked beyond apparent obstacles to see possibility. "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it," he declared, even as the other spies warned of giants and fortified cities. This capacity to see beyond apparent limitations marked Joshua as different. While serving as Moses' aide for 40 years, he absorbed not only practical leadership skills, but also a profound understanding of Israel's covenant relationship with their God. The biblical text notes that Joshua would remain at the tent of meeting even after Moses departed, suggesting a personal devotion and spiritual depth that transcended mere duty. Before Moses' death, he publicly commissioned Joshua as his successor in a ceremony that transferred authority and spiritual anointing. "Be strong and courageous," Moses charged him, words that would be echoed again when Joshua received his divine commission directly. "Be strong and very courageous." This repeated emphasis on courage reveals much about both Joshua's character and the magnitude of the challenges he would face. Courage is only needed when fear is reasonable, when the obstacles are genuinely daunting. Joshua's leadership would be defined not by the absence of fear, but by action in the face of it. In the early days of the Canaan campaign, Joshua demonstrated tactical brilliance and administrative wisdom. He established a central base at Gilgal, maintained supply lines, coordinated tribal units with different capabilities, and implemented intelligence gathering that proved crucial to military success. The victory at Jericho showcased his willingness to follow divine instructions that defied conventional military wisdom, while the eventual triumph at Ai demonstrated his ability to learn from setbacks and adapt strategies. Perhaps most revealing was his response to the Gibeonite deception. Though tricked into a covenant he would not have chosen to make, Joshua honored the commitment. When his own people grumbled against the decision, he stood firm, demonstrating that his integrity transcended both personal pride and popular opinion. This commitment to covenant faithfulness, even when costly, revealed the moral foundation of his leadership. Now, with the 5 kings marching against Gibeon, Joshua faced his greatest test. The Gibeonites' appeal placed him in an impossible situation: honor the covenant and face overwhelming military odds, or abandon his commitment and preserve his forces. His decision to undertake the night march to Gibeon, a grueling journey that would leave his troops exhausted before the battle even began, demonstrated both his covenant loyalty and his strategic boldness. What most distinguished Joshua, however, was neither his military acumen nor his administrative skill, but his extraordinary relationship with the divine. He moved with a quiet confidence born not of self-assurance, but of trust in a power beyond himself. "The Lord your God is with you wherever you go" was not merely a comforting platitude for Joshua, but the central reality that informed every decision. Before departing for Gibeon, Joshua sought divine counsel, receiving the assurance, "Do not be afraid of them, for I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you." This was the source of Joshua's courage, not an absence of fear, but a presence of faith that transcended it. Dawn broke over Gibeon as Joshua's forces, exhausted from their night march, came upon the Amorite coalition. The element of surprise gave the Israelites an initial advantage, but the superior numbers and equipment of the Amorite forces quickly became apparent as the battle was joined in earnest. The clash of bronze weapons echoed across the valley. Israelite infantry, armed primarily with spears, swords, and slings, engaged the more heavily armored Amorite forces. The initial Israelite charge had scattered the front lines of the coalition, but now their superior numbers allowed them to absorb the impact and begin to form a counterattack. Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem and leader of the coalition, commanded from a chariot ornamented with gold and electrum. "Surround their flanks," he shouted to his chariot commanders. "Cut them off from the Gibeon road." The tactical adjustment was swift and effective. 300 chariots peeled away from the main force, circling wide to entrap the Israelite forces between the main Amorite army and the rapidly approaching chariot squadrons. Joshua, observing from a rocky promontory, recognized the maneuver. "They seek to divide our forces," he told his captains. "Signal the tribes of Judah and Ephraim to fall back toward the ridge. We cannot let them surround us in the open valley." As the battle intensified, the superior numbers and equipment of the Amorite coalition began to tell. Israelite casualties mounted as the coalition forces pressed their advantage. The Amorite infantry advanced in tight formation, their shields overlapping to create an almost impenetrable wall, while archers positioned behind them sent volleys of arrows into the Israelite ranks. "Where is your God now, Hebrews?" taunted the Amorite commanders. "Did he abandon you as he did at Ai? Your bones will feed the jackals, and your names will be forgotten." The psychological warfare was as damaging as the physical assault. Among the Israelite forces, whispers of doubt began to spread. "There are too many. Their armor turns away our spears. We should never have come to Gibeon's aid." Joshua moved among his troops, his presence steadying wavering lines. "Remember the Jordan," he reminded them. "Remember Jericho. The same God who stopped the river and toppled the walls fights for us today." His words rallied their courage, but the strategic situation continued to deteriorate. By midday, the Israelite forces found themselves pushed back against the foothills, their formation increasingly fragmented. The Gibeonite fighters who had joined them were nearly surrounded, fighting desperately to maintain their position. From his command position, Adoni-Zedek sensed victory approaching. "Press them now," he ordered. "Do not let them regroup. By sunset, the Hebrews will be a memory." Joshua stood at the center of the Israelite line, his armor spattered with blood, some his enemies', some his own, from a glancing blow that had slipped past his guard. Around him, his men fought with determination but growing fatigue. The uneven nature of the contest was becoming more apparent with each passing hour. It was in this moment, as the battle hung in the balance, that Joshua felt a presence beside him. Not physical, but no less real. The same presence he had encountered before the walls of Jericho, introducing himself as commander of the Lord's army. A clarity cut through the chaos of battle, and Joshua knew what he must do. Lifting his spear toward heaven, Joshua's voice rang out above the clamor of combat. "O Lord, God of Israel, who brought us through the sea and across the Jordan, who delivered Jericho into our hands, the battle is yours, not ours." The sky had been darkening gradually throughout the morning, unusual clouds gathering despite the normally clear skies of the dry season. Now, as Joshua's prayer echoed across the battlefield, the darkness intensified dramatically. A sudden wind swept down from the heights, carrying with it a sharp chill that cut through the heat of battle. "Like Pharaoh's army at the sea, let our enemies know that you fight for Israel," Joshua continued, his voice strengthening with each word. "Like the walls of Jericho, let the strongholds of our adversaries collapse before your might." Across the battlefield, the fighting slowed as both sides became distracted by the rapidly changing conditions. The unnatural darkness, the swirling winds, the sudden drop in temperature, these phenomena transcended the ordinary experience of even seasoned warriors. Joshua dropped to one knee, his spear now planted in the ground before him. His captains exchanged alarmed glances, their commander kneeling in the midst of battle. But Joshua's posture was not one of surrender or defeat. It was the position of a man in the presence of authority far greater than his own. "Lord, you promised this land to our fathers," he prayed, his voice now lowered but somehow still carrying. Across the suddenly quieting battlefield, You promised that no one would be able to stand against us. You promised that as you were with Moses, so you would be with me. The Israelite forces, witnessing their commander's faith in this most desperate hour, found their own courage renewed. Even as the sky continued to darken ominously, they stood their ground with fresh determination. I do not know how you will deliver us, Joshua continued, his prayer transparent in its honesty, but I know that you will. For your name's sake, for your covenant's sake, act now, Lord of hosts. As Joshua rose to his feet, the first massive hailstone crashed to earth less than 50 yards from his position, landing with such force that it shattered a boulder. Then another struck, and another, not falling as normal hailstones might, but launching toward earth like projectiles with speed and direction that defied natural explanation. And in that moment of crisis, when all human strength and strategy had reached its limit, heaven itself seemed to open. The Lord fights for Israel, Joshua shouted, his voice carrying over the now retreating Amorite forces. The battle belongs to the Lord. The hailstones fell with increasing frequency, massive, dense projectiles, unlike anything previously witnessed in the region. Most remarkably, they seemed to discriminate in their targets, crashing with devastating precision among the Amorite forces while leaving the Israelite and Gibeonite fighters untouched. The first stones created confusion among the coalition forces. Soldiers looked skyward, momentarily distracted from the battle. But as the barrage intensified, confusion gave way to terror. Warriors who had stood firm against swords and spears broke ranks and fled before this unearthly assault. "The Hebrew God attacks," came the cry from the Amorite ranks. "Their God hurls stones from heaven." The orderly Amorite formations disintegrated. As soldiers sought any available shelter, charioteers abandoned their vehicles, which offered no protection from the aerial bombardment. The coalition commanders attempted to rally their forces, but their voices were drowned out by the impact of stones and the cries of the wounded. What had been a controlled retreat became a rout. The 5 kings, recognizing the collapse of their forces, ordered a full withdrawal down the road toward Beth Horon. Their considerable remaining forces might still regroup if they could escape the range of the strange storm. Joshua, seeing the tide of battle turn so dramatically, called for his captains. "The Lord has delivered them into our hand," he declared. "Now is the time to pursue. Do not let them regroup or reach their fortified cities." As the Israelite forces organized for pursuit, Joshua looked up at the darkened sky, at the continuing fall of the deadly hailstones, and at the sun barely visible through the supernatural gloom. A realization struck him. The day was already well advanced. If darkness fell before the pursuit was complete, many of the enemy would escape under cover of night. In that moment, inspired by the same faith that had led him to pray for divine intervention, Joshua spoke the words that would be remembered through the ages. "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Aijalon." And according to the ancient text, the sun and moon obeyed, giving the Israelites the extended daylight needed to complete their victory. The hailstones continued to fall as the coalition forces fled down the road to Beth Horon, killing more of the enemy than the Israelites did with their swords. The 5 kings, abandoning their troops in the chaos, sought refuge in a cave near Makkedah. But there would be no escape for them. With the extended daylight, Joshua's forces were able to locate them, execute them, and hang their bodies as a public demonstration that the power structures which had dominated Canaan were being fundamentally overturned. The extraordinary nature of what transpired that day at Gibeon did not fade from human memory. Even as centuries passed, the event remained a touchstone in Israel's collective consciousness, a moment when the boundary between heaven and earth seemed to dissolve when the creator of natural forces employed them in defense of his covenant people. The biblical account itself recognizes the unprecedented nature of what occurred. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. This was not merely religious hyperbole. The event left physical evidence that influenced regional development for generations. The path of the hailstorm created a corridor of agricultural disruption that archaeological surveys have noted as having unusually delayed settlement patterns compared to surrounding areas. Modern meteorologists studying historical weather patterns in the region have identified evidence of a major climatological event dating to approximately this period, an event that left traceable changes in pollen distribution and sediment layers. Beyond physical evidence, the victory at Gibeon altered the geopolitical landscape of Canaan. The decisive defeat of the five-king coalition opened the Central Highlands to Israelite settlement, providing the territorial foundation for what would become the tribal allotments of Benjamin and Judah. Jerusalem, though not captured until centuries later under David, never fully recovered its regional dominance after Adoni-Zedek's defeat. The battle entered the historical and literary consciousness of surrounding cultures as well. Fragments of Hittite diplomatic correspondence from a century later refer to the Habiru, whose god fights with stones from heaven, likely a reference to the reputation Israel gained from this event. Egyptian records from the period note a mysterious nation against whom the sky itself makes war among the peoples, disrupting their control of Canaan. Most significantly, the event established a theological paradigm that would shape Israel's understanding of their relationship with both their God and the natural world. Unlike the nature worship of surrounding cultures, which personified and deified natural forces, Israel came to understand nature as neither divine itself nor autonomous, but as subject to the command of the Creator. The sun was not a god to be worshipped. It was a created entity that could be commanded to stand still by the true God working through human agency. This theology found expression in Israel's Psalms, which frequently depict natural forces responding to divine direction. The mountains saw you and writhed. The sun and moon stood still in the heavens at the glint of your flying arrows, at the lightning of your flashing spear. The hailstones of Gibeon thus represent not merely a military intervention, but a fundamental statement about reality itself, that the material world remains responsive to its Creator, and that the God of Israel is not merely one deity among many, but the sovereign Lord of all creation. The ancient story of Joshua and the hailstones that killed more than swords resonates across time because it speaks to truths and principles that transcend their historical context. As we reflect on this extraordinary account, several enduring lessons emerge with striking clarity. First, we witness the principle that with God, the outcome is never limited by human resources. The Israelites faced a coalition with superior numbers, equipment, experience, and position. By every military assessment, they were overmatched. Yet the outcome of the battle was determined not by comparative human strength, but by divine intervention. This principle finds application in every generation, in circumstances both dramatic and ordinary. When we face challenges that exceed our capabilities, whether personal crises, systemic injustices, or global problems, the determining factor is not our inadequacy, but God's sufficiency. "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me" is not merely inspirational rhetoric, but the practical expression of this timeless truth. Our limitations never constrain God's possibilities. The question we must ask in facing our own impossible situations is not, "Do I have what it takes?" but "Am I aligned with the one who has what it takes?" Second, the narrative reveals that timing is often the domain of divine rather than human determination. Joshua's famous prayer for the sun to stand still recognized that even with the miraculous intervention of the hailstones, there might not be enough daylight to complete the victory. Rather than accepting this apparent limitation, he boldly asked for an extension of time itself. How often do we accept limitations of timing that God never intended? How frequently do we surrender to circumstances because there isn't enough time when the Creator of time stands ready to intervene? For still the vision awaits its appointed time. The prophet Habakkuk would later write, "If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay." God's timing rarely aligns with our expectations, but it always aligns with His purposes. When we surrender our timetables to divine wisdom, we position ourselves to experience intervention that transcends natural constraints. Third, we see demonstrated that covenant faithfulness precedes divine intervention. Joshua's decision to march to Gibeon's defense, despite the risk and difficulty, honored the covenant Israel had made. His commitment to integrity, even when the covenant resulted from deception, positioned Israel for divine favor. The principle echoes through Scripture. The eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to Him. Our own experience of divine intervention often hinges on our commitment to covenant integrity, our willingness to keep our word even when costly, to honor our commitments even when difficult. Such faithfulness creates the relational foundation for partnership with divine power. Fourth, the account illustrates that impossible situations often reveal divine character in ways that ordinary circumstances cannot. Had Israel faced an easily defeatable enemy, the extraordinary power of God might never have been demonstrated through the hailstones. The very impossibility of their situation created the context for an unprecedented display of divine intervention. In our own lives, what we perceive as unfair disadvantages or overwhelming challenges may actually be the precise conditions required for experiencing aspects of God's character and power that would otherwise remain theoretical. As Paul would later write of his own persistent difficulty, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Finally, the narrative establishes that divine intervention often comes in unexpected forms. The Israelites might have prayed for additional troops, improved weapons, or strategic advantage. Instead, God sent hailstones, an intervention no military strategist would have anticipated or planned for. This pattern of God working in unexpected ways continues throughout Scripture and human experience. When facing our own impossibilities, we often mentally constrain God to interventions we can imagine or mechanisms we understand. True faith remains open to surprise, to the God who specializes in immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. The hailstones of Gibeon stand as a witness across millennia, a testimony that when human strength reaches its limit, we stand at the threshold of divine possibility. The God who commanded stones from heaven and extended the day itself remains active and present, ready to demonstrate His power on behalf of those who trust Him. As you face your own impossibilities, remember the hailstones that killed more than swords. Remember that the battle ultimately belongs to the Lord. As the psalmist declared, "Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God." Your impossible situation may be the very context God has ordained to display His power in ways that will be remembered for generations. Your current challenge may be the stage upon which divine intervention demonstrates that human limitations never constrain heavenly possibilities. Stand firm in impossible moments. Look up when surrounded by insurmountable odds. For the same God who fought for Israel with hailstones from heaven fights for His people still. The same God who extended the day for Joshua can extend your resources, capabilities, and opportunities beyond natural explanation. The same covenant faithfulness that positioned Israel for victory can position you for breakthrough. The God of the hailstones is your God. And with Him, impossibility is just the starting point for miracle.